Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie. In this video, I'm going to be looking at the weekend of June the 15th and 16th, 2024. So there are two topics I'm going to look at this weekend. Firstly, I'm going to do a summer solstice preview. So the summer solstice is next week. It's on the 20th, I think. And, this is when the sun moves into Cancer. It is the point where the sun is at its very highest above the celestial equator. So it goes higher and higher and higher after the spring equinox. And then the summer solstice is the absolute peak. And in the northern hemisphere, it is the longest day. Obviously, in the southern hemisphere, it is the shortest day. And by definition, the summer solstice is the beginning of the sign Cancer, because Western astrologers use a tropical zodiac. We don't use a sidereal zodiac. So in other words, Western astrologers use a zodiac which is based on the seasons, and actually the positions of the constellations are, I'm afraid, irrelevant. Now, the summer solstice, from a sort of mythological point of view, is actually quite brutal. If you read Robert Graves's The White Goddess, he talks about kings and their deputies. The deputy is a tanist, and the idea is that at the winter solstice, the new king is chosen, and he has a deputy, the tanist. And Robert Graves associates this new king as being sort of Hercules-like figure, and he has an oak club. And so you have this new king, selected, I suppose, in the depths of winter. He becomes the king. He reigns for 6 months, and then at the summer solstice, he is torn apart. He is skinned alive. His eyes are ripped out. He's dismembered, and in a ritual which is it is quite brutal, incredibly brutal. And then his tanist replaces him, so you get the new king at the summer solstice, and this new king reigns for another 6 months, and then at the winter solstice, this king is in turn torn to shreds, and another king is chosen, and so the cycle continues. So the time of the solstice is important, and astrologically we can actually freeze the moment of the solstice and look at what's happening, and look at where the planets are, and we can perhaps get ideas about which parts of the world are get the most focus. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a solstice, the chart for the precise moment of the summer solstice from the northern hemisphere, and I'm going to sort of look at different parts of the world to consider where they might be, where there might be a sort of maximum impact. I also want to go back over solar returns. I did read the comments about the solar returns. It was pointed out to me that I had missed out a crucial detail about Trump's solar return for 2024, and I will look at that detail. And also, people were concerned I hadn't looked at the horoscope of RFK. Well, I have a problem with RFK, a couple of problems. Firstly, there's this thing called a Rodden rating. So Rodden was an astrologer who had ratings about how reliable data is, and so generally the best data is AA, or at least A. So that's the best. B is okay, but C and lower, you don't really want to get too hung up on that, because it's starting to become unreliable. And although if you go to astro.com and look at RFK's chart, it is there. There's a time, but it is a C rating. I don't like to use a C rating or lower because there's always a possibility that you spend huge amounts of time looking at someone's chart from the perspective of one time, and you really commit yourself to it, and then you find out later that that wasn't their time at all. It was actually something else, and it's kind of a bit embarrassing. Because another thing about RFK is that there is realistically no chance that he's going to become president. I mean, I'm not saying it astrologically. There comes a point where you have to look at the polls, and it just seems to be point. That seems to be it. Now, the only question with RFK is, who is he going to help? Is he going to help Trump get into the White House, or is he going to help Biden into the White House? It's a zero-sum game. It's like with Ross Perot when he stood in, what was it, 1992. I mean, Ross Perot helped Clinton get into the White House because he took votes away from George Bush Sr. or Ralph Nader standing in 2000. He got Bush into the White House because he took crucial votes away from Gore. So it's going to be the same thing, and I wouldn't be surprised. I'm pretty sure, actually, when the dust has settled, that the question will be with RFK is, who did he help get into the White House? Did he help Biden get into the White House, or did he help Trump get into the White House? I don't know which way it is. My hunch is, but probably he'll help. But if Biden wins, it'll be because of JFK. But I don't know. At the moment, people are saying that votes are leaving sort of equally. But still, I will attempt to look at RFK's solar return. I refuse to use a timed chart for RFK because his Rodden rating is C. Yeah, you can find a time for him on astro.com, but I refuse to use that time because it's only a C. And we might have the illusion that we have an accurate time there. But before I look at all of this, I want to look at the astrology and the I Ching for the weekend. So this is the weekend of June the 15th and 16th, 2024. So here we have the chart for the weekend. So this is the weekend, this is a chart for the middle of the weekend, when Saturday becomes Sunday, New York time. And astrologically, it's not actually that interesting. There's nothing really major going on this weekend. The moon is in Libra. You can see middle of a weekend moon. It's just edging into the Via Combusta. So the moon is in Via Combusta. There's that part of the sky between 15 Libra and 15 Scorpio where things can happen that we weren't expecting. It happens every month, so in that sense it's not a particularly big deal. So the moon is edging into Libra. It's has a very sort of distant trine to Jupiter and Pluto. So on Saturday, actually, there was a sort of grand trine feel about Saturday, with the moon trine Jupiter, trine Pluto. So that's potentially quite nice, particularly early on Saturday. There may be a feeling that things are flowing, but perhaps we shouldn't get too caught up by exact aspects. The point is, moon is in Libra, Jupiter is in Gemini, Pluto is in Aquarius, so that there's a nice flow there, and particularly a flow of ideas. Things are happening. People have got things to talk about, and there is a certain sense in which people can really air their ideas and get some feedback without feeling that they're actually committing themselves. I mean, of all the four elements, perhaps the air signs are most non-committal. They can, speculate. That's what air is about. And also we've got on Saturday Mercury biquintile Pluto. So there's Mercury, there's Pluto. They are 144 degrees apart. So that's 2/5 of the circle. So remember, if you've got a cake, cut it into five equal segments, very big segments, but depends on the size of the cake, I suppose. But the number 5 is important. Mercury Pluto is about perhaps having an idea and suddenly feeling we have to get this idea out into the open. We just can't really help ourselves. Interestingly, Hitler made his first political speech in 1919, where he immediately made a name for himself when Pluto was transiting his Mercury. That would have been, I think, that was by a quintile. I think that there was a transiting quintile to Hitler's Mercury, and he just couldn't help himself. I think they were discussing separating Bavaria off from the rest of Germany, and Bavaria maybe joining Austria or becoming an independent country. I can't remember which one it is. And he was so outraged, he stood up, and everyone listened to him, and that was the beginning of his political career. So we shouldn't underestimate these quintiles and biquintiles. So if we get this sudden idea that we need to say something, or we need to communicate something, Pluto may encourage us. So that is a possibility there. Also on Saturday, we have got Mars semisextile Jupiter. I think. There we have it. Mars semisextile Jupiter. Is a certain amount of urgency there. Mars is in Taurus. It likes to do things its way. It wants to solidly move forward. But then it comes up against Jupiter. Jupiter is saying to Mars, just relax a bit. Don't take things so seriously. And so with that Mars semisextile Jupiter, some of us might be really stubborn and we might want to do things our way and we might be taking things seriously. And then there's this pressure to just lighten up. Or it could be the other way around. It could be Jupiter and Gemini being light and wanting variety and not wanting to make commitments. And then Mars in Taurus comes along and says, get it together. Be serious. So that Mars semisextile Jupiter is a little bit challenging, but it's not like a square or an opposition. Then moving to Sunday, we have got Sun biquintile Pluto. It's kind of similar to the Mercury biquintile Pluto. And it's what we've really got, arguably, is the Sun-Mercury conjunction over the weekend, getting a biquintile aspect from Pluto. And so perhaps we should see the aspect as just a single aspect that dominates the weekend, or certainly has a big influence over the weekend. Sun biquintile Pluto is about issues of power and feeling that we do have to assert ourselves. I mean, that is certainly one way in which the biquintile may be working. We have this idea and we take it seriously and we can't let go of it. And we're thinking, how can we turn this idea into reality? Also, on Sunday, we've got the moon making a trine to the sun. And moon trine suns, fairly straightforward aspects. They represent a sense of oneness, harmony, the cosmic marriage, and as I think it's Charles Harvey described the sun-moon midpoint in terms of, in his book Working with Astrology, I think it's the cosmic marriage. I think he used that term, that things are in balance. Sun and moon, male and female, are very much together and they're working together. So the Sunday might actually be quite a good day, quite a relaxing day for many of us when everything seems to be in order. But really this weekend, on paper, there is not a great deal going on. We can look at the heliocentric picture just to see if that gives us a different view. So here is the weekend from a heliocentric view. And so what we see heliocentrically is a Venus-Mercury conjunction. That Venus-Mercury conjunction sort of rather creeped up on us. I hadn't really noticed it. Now there it is. And Venus-Mercury heliocentric conjunction, I would have said, is quite nice. It's very constructive. It's artistic. So if we have any artistic skills, or we have ideas that we might be artistic, remember I'm talking about art in all forms, whether it's writing, painting, sculpting, drawing, whatever the art might be, we should perhaps be focusing on it. And remember, this is a heliocentric chart. This is about the cosmos. It's very impersonal. And so with a Mercury-Venus conjunction heliocentrically, perhaps from an artistic point of view, we have access to something higher from ourselves. Maybe there's access to the cosmos. We're being given inspiration that comes from nowhere. So do try to work on it. It could be quite an inspired weekend. And talking about inspiration and imagination, we mustn't forget that the Earth is moving towards a square of Neptune. There is the Earth at 2531 Sagittarius, moving to a square of Neptune at 2755 Pisces. Now, that square is not going to be exact for another few days, but we're starting to feel it. On the downside, there's a little bit of confusion creeping into proceedings. We're not quite sure what's going on. Things are becoming a bit nebulous, but we might be getting powerful dreams, cosmos telling us something, and at the same time, our imagination is going to start to be on good form, and that feeds in to that Venus-Mercury conjunction in Cancer. So that's a heliocentric picture. I would, at this stage, emphasize the Mercury-Venus conjunction. And I think the Mercury-Venus conjunction is, by and large, pretty positive, particularly if we have any ideas that we might have artistic skills. Even if we don't have artistic skills, we always say some people have artistic skills, some people don't. Well, I suppose we have to tune into our inner artist, whoever we are, even if we don't feel we are an artist. And I think that we may be able to communicate our ideas quite well. It may not just be about art, maybe about business. Ideas for making money, entrepreneurial ideas. There's always a way to, I suppose, make money. And they do say that there's nothing new under the sun. So if there's nothing new under the sun, there are just ideas waiting to be discovered. Well, not discovered, rediscovered. And perhaps with that Mercury-Venus conjunction, we can start to pick up on them. Okay, that's the heliocentric picture. And it's now time to look at the weekend from the view of the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for the weekend of June the 15th and 16th, 2024. Aries, you do have to consider other people. Standard thing to say with Moon in Libra. I mean, Moon is in Libra, it's in your opposite sign, and there is going to be pressure there to listen to what people are saying, and perhaps even to change your schedule. I mean, change your plans, drop everything because other people want to do something. And that is not a very dignified position for Aries to be in. You have to consider that maybe you have to hold firm. So actually, I think there are temptations to drop everything. It may not be what you want to do, but certainly the temptations are there. And I think in many cases it's going to be easiest to do what other people say and not make a fuss. Again, that's not typically Aries behavior, but that might be how you see things over the weekend. I would advise you to hold firm. You know, someone needs to lead. Someone needs to be in control. We all need the Aries personality around to lead us forward. And if Aries is worrying about what other people are saying, then that's not a good sign. So Aries, yes, you have to consider what other people are saying and suggesting. You've got to give people an opportunity to express themselves, but don't take it too far. There comes a point where you absolutely have to assert yourself, and you shouldn't have to apologize about it, because that's the way you are. And right now, it is your destiny to assert yourself. That's what you're supposed to be doing, because the North Node, which is the way forward, is in Aries. And at the same time, Aries, I do think that you have a natural authority which people cannot deny or they can't take away from it. There are things you know and there are things you understand that other people don't get. And if you feel at any stage this weekend that you're losing control of things, then it's actually relatively easy to re-establish control. You just have to clearly state things the way they are, or at least the way you see it. And as soon as you do that, people will stop what they're doing and they'll say, okay, they will start to recognize that your way is the best way. But don't feel that it all needs to be, a big struggle. It doesn't have to be a struggle this weekend. You can get your way, I think, pretty easily. And it's just about talking. It's about saying what's on your mind, but also showing a tiny amount of sensitivity. You need to say the right things to people, and with the moon trine the sun on Saturday, I think that you can adjust your message to fit the other person. Just a small adjustment, and they'll again say, well, yeah, you were right all along. And then things will start flowing, and I think that then things will start flowing in your favor. Now, one aspect that I did mention at the beginning of this video was the fact that Mars, which is your ruler, is semi-sextile Jupiter. And that Mars sextile Jupiter is an aspect which seems to suggest that you, Aries, are very keen on doing something. It's like there's one thing you really want to do this weekend, and you really want to focus on it, and you want to make sure that everything is in order. And then you've got this semi-sextile to Jupiter. There is something bothering you. And I think what is bothering you is the fact that there are a few facts that you really did not want to take into account, because they just made things complicated. It may not be facts, it may be details, it may be certain aspects of the personalities you're dealing with. That may be one thing. It may be just the fact that you're just being a little too focused on one thing. But anyway, this Mars semi-sextile Jupiter means that you do need to take into account of other realities. Now, as I've already said, this is a weekend where you need to be putting yourself first. This is not a weekend where you need to be doing things other people's way. It's a weekend where you should be understanding what other people want, what other people are like, but not compromising. And I think that this Mars semi-sextile Jupiter is about the process of understanding. You can't do things exactly the way you'd like to do them. You have to make a few adjustments to your approach. It's like fine-tuning. But I think that once you've done that fine-tuning, you'll be fine. And I'm confident that you can have a successful weekend. Taurus, you are feeling, in some ways, a little bit under the weather. I mean, I don't mean ill, just a feeling that things aren't entirely the way you'd like them to be. And you feel that, things have to be changed and they're not perfect, but do you have the capacity to make changes? And you may feel that, there's not much you can actually do. But I think you need to focus on what actually can be done. And remember that from an astrological perspective, this weekend, there isn't actually a great deal going on, at least from a geocentric point of view. So if you don't feel that there's any excitement out there, you'd probably be right. But in your own way, you can make a few quiet changes and adjustments. So start with yourself and your immediate environment, change what you feel needs to be changed, but don't get obsessed with things being absolutely right. It's nice if things are right, if things are perfect, but this weekend, perfection is an impossible ideal, and you do have to deal with a little bit of chaos on the margins. And at the same time, you shouldn't underestimate yourself. We've already looked at the heliocentric chart, and from a heliocentric point of view, there is a conjunction between Mercury and Venus. And Venus is, of course, your ruler. So that heliocentric conjunction between Mercury and Venus does highlight some of your abilities, some of the things you can actually do in the real world, but people are going to say, wow, that's great. So what is it that you could do that could get favourable attention? Okay, you may not get the favourable attention this weekend, but I'm confident that you can create something really quite important this weekend. And it is going to require a little bit of work, but I do think that that is something that you can do, that you can achieve. And also, I should also point out, Taurus, that in a general sense, you don't seem to feel that there's much point in saying anything, because you may have your doubts about whether anyone will listen to you. Well, I think on that score, you'd be wrong. Firstly, I've just mentioned the heliocentric Mercury-Venus conjunction. Venus is conjunct Mercury heliocentrically. Mercury is a communication planet. There seems to me, no doubt, Taurus, that if you do say something, people are going to listen. Further, there's a sense in which you can bring your message to bear on the world around you. Whether it's your family, colleagues, friends, if you've got a clear, unambiguous message that you just want to say it, you don't have to use many words, just a simple message, and you say, well, it's like this. Again, I think that people are going to listen to you. So really, Taurus, what you do need, I think, is self-confidence. Self-confidence is really what it's all about, and also a self-confidence, not just in your ability to deliver a message, but also a confidence in your own creative abilities, the fact that you have got something very special to offer. One final point about money. There is a biquintile aspect involving Pluto on one hand and the Sun and Mercury on the other. Taurus is quite a materialistic sign, and I think that you might have some kind of vision about your finances or about the way your money should be or the way your money should be organized. And that is a vision that can come true if you have the willpower. And I think that Pluto biquintile Sun and Mercury will actually give you the willpower. Gemini. There are still 4 planets in Gemini: Jupiter, Sun, Mercury, and Venus. And the moon is now in Libra. Indeed, on Saturday, we've kind of got a grand trine. So grand trine is when you've got a trine involving all of the air signs. So we've got Gemini, Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius. So the moon at the beginning of the weekend is trine Jupiter, and it's trine Pluto. And so you start the weekend, Gemini, with a lot of things going on. Your mind is flowing. There are things you want to do. You've got some good ideas, and that's good. And you certainly shouldn't be doubting yourself. And it's perhaps a time for discussing your ideas with other people or researching your ideas. Perhaps you can write things down. What you want to do, what your plans are, and you might see things which you just hadn't seen before. So it's important this weekend to give yourself a fair amount of variety. I mean, Geminis, they like variety. Variety is important to Geminis. And, I'm confident that you can find the kind of variety you are looking for. And additionally, on Saturday, Mercury is biquintile Pluto. So Mercury is your ruler. It's biquintile Pluto. That biquintile is about you having a certain sense of confidence about what you can do and what you can achieve. And actually having a sense of your own power. And that sense of your own power, of course, it starts as an internal process. And then you start to build on it. The biquintile is about building on it, concentrating on it, focusing on something. And in the end, what happens in your mind can actually be reflected in what's actually going on in the outside world. You're also helped by the fact that Mercury, which is of course your ruler, is conjunct Venus. And that it's a heliocentric conjunction. It's not a geocentric conjunction. But this heliocentric conjunction between Mercury and Venus is going to allow you to, I think, be quite successful in a social sense, provided you choose the right places to go to. Not everyone appreciates you, Gemini. That's the way it is. But if you go to the right places, people will really enjoy your company, and the things you communicate will be quite exciting. People will really want to hear what you've got to say, and you don't have to compromise. You don't have to, do things other people's way. You can just be yourself. But with Mercury conjunct Venus, you will know how to behave. You will have an understanding of other people. You'll know what they can deal with, what they can't deal with, what their limits are. So I do think that's quite a positive thing for you to be able to tune into. So broadly speaking, Gemini, I think it looks like being quite a good weekend where most things should work out. And that includes one-to-one relationships. I mean, the moon is in Libra, Jupiter it's trine Jupiter. It's particularly strong at the beginning of a weekend, that moon trine Jupiter. And that moon trine Jupiter allows you to get on with people, get on with particular individuals, provided the relationship is one of equals, where if you and someone else have the same priorities and the same tastes, then I think that things are going to work out extremely well. Cancer. Left to your own devices, Cancer, I think that you would probably feel that you just want a quiet weekend. There's nothing really you want to do. But the problem is, Cancer, is that we have a conjunction between the moon and the south node. Now, we get this conjunction between the moon and the south node every month. And it's in Libra. And, of course, the moon is your ruler. And so the problem with the moon conjunct the south node is that it encourages you to be a little lazy in terms of doing things that are really in your comfort zone and not wanting to go beyond your comfort zone. And that might mean that you're tempted to duck out of challenges. There are always challenges. There are always things that you need to do, that the universe wants you to do. And this weekend, you don't want to do it. Maybe you're being a little bit ODD about it. What's that ODD? Oppositional defiance disorder. Is that right? Anyway, being a bit ODD about it. Things you want to do, you want to do it your way, and you don't really want to listen to the universe. It's all about you. But, you've got to listen to the universe. The universe matters, because I suppose the problem is that if you don't listen to the universe, things can go wrong. And so ask yourself how you can, go beyond your comfort zone without compromising your comfort and your security. I understand you're a Cancerian. Comfort and security are important to you. And that always needs to be in order. And it shouldn't be an either-or situation. You think, well, if I value my security and my comfort, then I just have to just do what I want to do. If I do anything that goes beyond that comfort zone, then I'm in trouble. That's not actually true, I don't think. And there's always that pressure at the moment to give your input. That's what the universe wants you to do. But as far as the universe is concerned, you've got something to contribute, and you've got something to contribute that really can help other people get themselves together. Because let's face it, a lot of people out there are fairly clueless. They don't know what to do. You actually do know what to do. As a Cancer, you have a strong sense of right and wrong, and it might actually be a good idea to tell people about this sense of right and wrong, and yes, to provide some leadership. And you will be providing leadership from a position of your own comfort and security. So in other words, you can be out there, you can be making things happen without compromising your comfort and security. And, on Saturday, with the moon making a trine to Jupiter, you shouldn't underestimate your good fortune. You're not in a bad position, and you can actually make some interesting discoveries on Saturday. Give it some thought. It's perhaps about going into an area that you're not entirely familiar with, you probably don't really want to get involved, because maybe you don't want to have to deal with new information. If you expose yourself to new information, that just might make things complicated. But I don't think you should be afraid of new information. Yeah, you may have to change your approach, but I don't think it's going to cause a huge transformation. I think that in the end, you're going to be able to integrate the new into yourself, into your existing way of looking at the world. And then I think that you will certainly be doing the right thing. And I think in the end, the universe will appreciate what you're doing. So there's not really a great deal to say, Cancer. I'm just suggesting that you shouldn't get too caught up in your own comfort zone. I mean, I know it's tempting. I know it is the weekend when people are allowed to retreat into their comfort zone, but there still seems to be a couple of things you need to do, and certain people do need your advice. So try to bear that in mind. Leo. It's important, Leo, that you don't get heavily involved in any one thing. I think that a certain amount of detachment is going to be important, because if you get involved in something, if you start taking things seriously, then you start wasting a lot of time and energy, and you get angry, and it just doesn't work out. But if you can instead not worry about what happens in the end, you can put energy into something without emotional commitment. You can hope that by putting energy into something, it works out. But you also take the view that if it doesn't work out, really, it's not the end of the world. And I think that this sort of relaxed approach is going to make you happier, and I think it's going to make other people happier. You're going to be sort of an easy person to be with. Remembering that, recently there was a conjunction between the Sun and Mercury. Well, there still is a conjunction between Sun and Mercury. There's still a very tight conjunction between the Sun and Mercury. But it's not exact anymore. Mercury is starting to move away from the Sun. But, over the last few days, you might have been a bit too much. Perhaps you've been taking things too seriously. And, yeah, you might have been a hard person to deal with. But you're becoming easier as a person, and other people are starting to be more relaxed in your presence, and you want to continue with this process by just not taking anything too seriously. Yeah, I know that we're supposed to have goals, but try not to be too goal orientated, especially on Saturday. With Saturday we've got the moon trine Jupiter, and that should be about an easy flow, and about perhaps dealing with people in a sort of fairly relaxed way, and not pressurizing anyone. Still, on Sunday, the Sun, which is your ruler, is biquintile Pluto. Biquintile, 2/5 of a circle, 144 degrees. And so Sun biquintile Pluto is about your power and the realization that you can make things happen. And you do have to get the balance right. You have to, accept that you're in a strong position. But you also have to accept that if you put too much energy into something, it's going to start to it's going to start to get out of control, and your emotions might start to engage. And if once your emotions start to engage, then things might go wrong. If something becomes too important to you, then you'll lose the plot. So it's really about having a goal. Certainly by Sunday, it's about having a goal, something you want to happen, but at the same time not getting worked up about it, and even being easy with the idea that sometimes we don't get what we want. It's nice if we get what we want, but if we don't get what we want, really it doesn't matter. And also on Sunday we have Moon trine Sun. Moon trine Sun is an easy aspect, and this Moon trine Sun, it's fortunate from a Leo perspective. The Sun is in Gemini, the Moon is in Libra. Gemini and Libra are two signs that have a good relationship with Leo. They're both positive signs, but they have different elements. So Leo is a fire sign. Gemini and Libra are air signs. So they're not in competition, but they're not trying to fight for the same space, but they just have sort of a complementary energy there, and they do complement one another. And so by Sunday you can find, I think, real harmony. Things are moving. The positive and the negative are nicely balanced. Yes, you have your goals, things you want to achieve, but you're easy about them, hopefully. And if it doesn't work out short term, it doesn't matter. And I think that on Sunday, people are going to like you, or at least they can like you if you're relaxed. Virgo, you do have a strong sense of what you want to achieve. And in that sense, I don't think, Virgo, you're particularly relaxed this weekend. I think especially on Saturday. You feel that you want something more, and just the way it is not quite good enough. And so you are sort of striving for something else. So this perhaps needs to be worked out. What is it that you want, and what are you taking so seriously? Because I think, Virgo, there is something you're taking seriously. That is because Mercury is biquintile Pluto. Mercury is 144 degrees from Pluto. There's something that you feel you absolutely can achieve if you're given the chance. And so it may be that you have an idea that's really very important to you, and you want to project that idea onto the world out there. You want that idea to become a reality. Now, I think that idea can become a reality, and as soon as you actually articulate that idea, you will find that people start to listen to you, and they start taking you seriously. And you don't have to be aggressive about it. Just be yourself, and yes, people are going to listen. Even if you feel that there's going to be a conflict, just because you feel there's going to be a conflict doesn't mean there actually is going to be a conflict. And this may apply to money. If you discuss money, it's going to be strangely easy to discuss money over the weekend, because normally money is quite a difficult subject to talk about. But this weekend, I think it'll be relatively straightforward, and I think that people will listen to you, and it'll sound very obvious. Now, just because you can get people to discuss money and you can start to talk about your financial needs. Doesn't necessarily mean that you're going about things in the right way. I think, Virgo, there's some danger that you oversimplify things. Again, especially with money. You might think it's just a simple matter, getting the books to balance, or for example, making sure you don't spend too much. But I think it's a danger to oversimplify things because things are actually a little more complicated than they seem. I don't mean that necessarily in a bad sense, but things are rather complicated. And if you make a decision about money on the basis that things are easy, then that decision may have to be reversed at a later stage. So, if this weekend you decide to have a discussion about money, to tell people about what you think about money, it may not even involve other people. It may involve yourself, just having thoughts about money and perhaps deciding you want to reorganize your finances. And it might just all seem very simple, but it's not simple. So once you start, you need to be able to go through to the end, chase one complication down after another. And that way you can really start to accomplish something, but just don't make assumptions in that direction. But there's no doubt that the financial side of things is going to be important this weekend, and there are certainly things you can do. And matters are helped by the fact that, the beginning of the weekend, the moon trines Jupiter. So moon trine Jupiter is a very fortunate aspect. And I think that you can actually take steps to make yourself secure and perhaps to sort out new income sources, or if you're not getting enough money, starting a process by which you can make more money. So I think that is quite lucky, that trine between Moon and Jupiter. But just be ready for a little bit of hard work. That hard work might be necessary, and it might not be what you want to do, but I think it's something that you do have to do. Though I don't think that you yourself need to be hard work in terms of how other people judge you. I think that your social skills over the weekend are going to be pretty good. This is because Mercury, which is your ruler, is conjunct the Sun-Venus midpoint. In fact, we've got Mercury is conjunct the Sun, Mercury is conjunct Venus, and so with Mercury conjunct the Sun-Venus midpoint, I think that your social skills are going to be really very good. And that Mercury-Venus conjunction, which is active as a geocentric Mercury-Venus conjunction, there's also a heliocentric Mercury-Venus conjunction. And that heliocentric Mercury-Venus conjunction is absolutely exact this weekend. And I think that, that really does emphasize your social skills and the fact that you can bring people on board. So if you feel that you don't have enough support, whatever you're doing, I think that you really can take active steps to gain that support. And indeed, that might be the key to everything. So if possible, try to have an active weekend. And remember, just that Mercury-Venus conjunction geocentrically is in Gemini, and Gemini is a high-profile sign. It's a sign that is often associated with ambition and career and business. And I'm sure it's a weekend, but I think, Virgo, you're not going to want to be limited by the fact that it's a weekend. Just because it's a weekend doesn't mean you can't do stuff. There's plenty of stuff you can do, and I think if you're very focused, I think you can really cover a lot of ground. Libra, you know how it is. I do my preparation for this video, and I sort of consider what I want to talk about, and then I forget about it. I miss something out. So Libra, I'm going to let you into a secret. I'm going to tell you something that I didn't tell anyone else, and that is the fact that Venus, which is your ruling planet, is conjunct the fixed star Betelgeuse. Now, I think Betelgeuse, it means the hand of Orion. And I've got Vivian Robeson's The Fixed Stars and Constellations in Astrology. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look up what he says about Betelgeuse. And he says that Betelgeuse is of the nature of Mars and Mercury, and at least according to Ptolemy, and it gives martial honour, preferment and wealth. So that sounds pretty good, and I think that having Venus conjunct Betelgeuse should be quite motivating for you. Now, what Robeson says about Venus conjunct Betelgeuse, you can take it or leave it. I'm just reading what someone else says. This is not my interpretation. I kind of have to take it on face value. With Venus, somewhat retiring and reserved, great ability as a maker of fine ornaments, favourable for gain, some sorrow connected with the family or marriage. So if we take Robeson's view of Betelgeuse, Venus conjunct Betelgeuse, you may feel that perhaps you do want to keep yourself to yourself a little bit. There's certain reserve there. But at the same time, there's an indication that you've got particular talents. It's talking about ornaments. Maybe your aesthetic sense is quite good with Venus conjunct Betelgeuse. And it's happening actually at the same time as Venus is conjunct Mercury. So Venus conjunct Betelgeuse, conjunct Mercury, I think Libra could very much emphasize your artistic skills, your abilities, and the fact that you can gain a certain amount of honor through what you create. And so I think that this is something very much to be welcomed, though it's true though that Robeson suggested that Venus conjunct Betelgeuse might give you a certain sort of retiring nature. I don't know how you feel about that this weekend. That maybe you feel perhaps there are things you'd like to do which don't really need other people. You don't need to be in the limelight. You just want to get going on them. You want to do them and you don't want to be disturbed. So that is one possibility about with Venus conjunct Betelgeuse. But that's just one thing going on today. We also have the moon in Libra. Moon is very much in Libra. Moon is right in the middle of your sign. So I think with moon in Libra, you're feeling in your own way quite comfortable. You know how you'd like to be arranging things, and you want to do things your way, but you don't want to fuss about it. I think if you take that approach, you might get tripped up a little, because you could find that there are things going on out there, things are going on, perhaps what other people are doing, that you're not entirely connected with, but it still has an influence on you. So it's like you want to pretend that something is not going to impact you, but in fact it does impact you, and that really can't be avoided. So do consider what's going on out there, and don't be afraid of telling people what you think and what you feel. You have got at the moment, I believe, some really quite strong ideas, important ideas, that I think people need to listen to. And it may also be the case that you have to be a little bit aggressive in a verbal sense. I mean, aggressive is probably the wrong word. That's a bit too strong. Perhaps it's more about being assertive. But you have to be a little bit assertive, delivering a clear message. I mean, that's what people want. People do want a clear message. But this moon in Libra it's making some nice aspects. It's making a trine to Jupiter. It's making a trine to a Sun. And I think the challenge here perhaps is to do something a little bit different and to perhaps see the world in a different way. You know, because on Saturday, in fact, the moon was actually trine Pluto as well. So we have this grand trine in air, which was certainly around at the beginning of Saturday. So a lot of ideas and concepts are flowing, and you're seeing things in a different way. And I think that you can very much benefit from this. So if you think at the beginning of a weekend that you've got everything sorted out, that you understand everything, you would be wrong, because there is new information coming your way, new ways of looking at the world, and you don't necessarily have to make a big effort to find it. It will almost come in an inspired kind of way. You just sit and think about it, and then suddenly it becomes obvious. And so when you realize that things are not the way you thought they were, then you shouldn't be distressed. You should be happy, because you are being given inspiration, real inspiration, which can really help propel you forward. So overall, Libra, there's a lot of energy going on. And, you know, heliocentrically, we've got a Mercury-Venus conjunction. You know, the universe is giving you a lot. It's making a lot available to you in terms of what you can do, ideas, giving you hints about the future. It's all there for you. The cosmos is making it easy, but it's now up to you to take advantage of everything that the cosmos is making available to you. In the end, it's your decision. You can ignore what the cosmos is doing. You can ignore the cosmos. You can take the view that it's just all about you. You don't want to change, and that would be a shame. But so open your eyes and really consider how you can benefit from the cosmos, because the cosmos wants you to succeed this weekend. And I think even further from that, the cosmos perhaps regards the weekend as being a good foundation for the future. Scorpio, you probably feel that you don't really want to be bothered. You feel that it's a world that is not really interested in you, that you can do your own thing and just not have to worry. That's your view, I think, at the moment. I mean, it's a short-term view, and I don't think that you should get completely obsessed about it. I mean, things change, and you don't want to waste time. You could waste a lot of time this weekend. I mean, this weekend could just fly past, and you could end up achieving nothing. Maybe you don't want to achieve anything. But really, Scorpio, I would encourage you to be a little more dynamic. And I think there will be pressure on you to be more dynamic, because, you know, Mars is in Taurus at the moment. So Mars is your ruler. And, you know, with Mars in Taurus, which is a fixed sign, you can be very stuck in your ways. You can just get comfortable doing things in a particular way, and you'll just stick with it, and you'll refuse to listen to outside opinions, even though the world is actually influencing you. You don't know that. It's almost like the world is impacting you, but you refuse to accept that the world is impacting you. And that makes it even more difficult. But there is a challenge, and that challenge perhaps comes from the fact that Mars is semi-sextile Jupiter. So there's you, Mars, doing things your way, but there's that challenge, Jupiter in Gemini. Jupiter in Gemini is an energy which Scorpio finds it difficult to deal with. It's challenging you to think about alternative approaches, and it's actually challenging you to lighten up. It's telling you that if you take the world too seriously, then you're not going to accomplish very much. Indeed, it's not just about taking the world too seriously, it's about taking yourself too seriously. And that's something you shouldn't do. And because if you're taking yourself too seriously, you are really, I think, limiting yourself. And, okay, sure, this period is going to end, and the moon will go into Scorpio, I think, on Monday, and things might be easier when the moon goes into Scorpio. But at the moment, you're being challenged to see another view. And hopefully that's a challenge that you're going to pick up, because if you refuse to accept what's going on out there, and if you think it's all about you, what's going to happen is that you're just going to get more and more tense, and I don't think you're going to be a happy Scorpio. So it is actually important that you lighten up from your perspective. So that's something that you should really try to consider. And at the same time, do also bear in mind other people and what other people are trying to say. I think that some of the people close to you do indeed have a lot to say, and probably you don't want to hear it. You maybe take the view that some people are just talking too much. Well, maybe they are talking too much, but I don't think you should jump to conclusions. You should, at least hear what people have to say. I think that you might be surprised, and also it might create a shift. I think that there is a shift that is required for Scorpios, but you don't right now seem to want to make that shift. So maybe I suppose it's just the weekend. So perhaps it's all just too much effort, and maybe things will be easier on Monday. I'm not saying it's a difficult weekend. I think if it is a difficult weekend, it's going to be a difficult weekend because you've made it a difficult weekend. And so it actually doesn't have to be a problem, but maybe you're just making it a problem. So do consider that. And as far as other people are concerned, do you want to make people's life a misery? You could make people's life a misery, just because you're there and you're not there. You might think that you are retreating, that you're not in anyone's way, you're just in your own private world, but that's not true. You have an impact, even if you think you're not having an impact. If you, for example, I don't know, have locked yourself up into a room, and you might think that you've isolated yourself from the rest of the world, or from your family or your friends or whatever, you're still emanating vibes. People can still feel the Scorpio presence. The way you view the world, you're emanating radio signals. And so people are picking up on those radio signals. And if those radio signals are sort of bad, I don't know, like Radio Tirana. If you remember Radio Tirana, in the 80s, Radio Tirana was this Albanian radio station which would pour out communist propaganda. It was always fun to try to pick up Radio Tirana. I remember going to a CND rally in the early 80s, and I came back home from a CND rally and I listened to Radio Tirana, and Radio Tirana was telling me that the British police had shot some demonstrators. I didn't hear any shots, but Radio Tirana is always there. It's always pushing something out. We can't ignore Radio Tirana. But you don't want to have that kind of influence. And you do need to recognize your impact on the rest of the world. So for everyone's sake, Scorpio, maybe you just need to be a little more positive and a little more proactive. Sagittarius. You're, I think, Sagittarius in quite a friendly mood. You're quite relaxed. You don't want any pressure. You want to go with the flow, and that's just the way you see it. And maybe that's fine. Remember on Saturday, the moon is trine Jupiter, and the moon is trine Pluto, and oops, that's wrong. Let me fix that. And so there's a lot of flow there, and so you can actually have quite a positive influence without even trying. In fact, it can be quite a transformative influence, Sagittarius. So just by being yourself, making yourself available, giving your opinions if asked, people are going to listen to you, and you can almost make the world how you want it to be, or at least your little part of the world. And so, Sagittarius, don't underestimate your influence. So if you're too relaxed, in a way, that might be a wasted opportunity. So consider, Sagittarius, how would you like people to be? So if you're not happy with some aspects of your social life, and with some aspects of people's behavior, now might be the perfect opportunity to make a few changes without any need for conflict, just by being yourself. Rather than criticizing other people, it's about presenting your vision of the world as an alternative. And I think your vision of the world is actually going to be very powerful, and most people are going to like it and appreciate it. Now, I'm not saying there are going to be no complications, because today there is a semi-sextile aspect between Mars and Jupiter. So yeah, Jupiter's your ruler. Jupiter's in Gemini, so you could say that there's Jupiter in Gemini, happy-go-lucky Jupiter, everything's fine. But then there's semi-sextile Mars. What is that semi-sextile about? That semi-sextile could be an irritation. This is particularly on Saturday rather than Sunday. Just an irritation, something that you don't want to attend to, that you kind of have to attend to, something you'd forgotten. You thought everything was fine, but something needs to be addressed. And it may, in the first instance, be a little bit difficult, particularly if it's about another person. But it could just be something boring. Some just boring chore that needs to be done, and until you've done it, you can't proceed with everything else. So perhaps on Saturday you need to actually just work out what it is, and once you've worked out what it is, then you can progress as normal. And just don't forget, Jupiter is still in trine aspect to Pluto, and the moon is bringing that trine together again. Remember, grand trine early Saturday, moon trine Jupiter, moon trine Pluto, Pluto trine Jupiter. So you've got that trine energy. And so it's flowing, and it's about you flowing, and it's about you through this flow creating change. Remember, it's all about transformation. You are transforming yourself, and in the process you're transforming other people. But this transformation doesn't seem to be very tense. It just seems to be natural. It's like you and everyone else are moving from one state to another state, and I think the whole thing is very easy, and I think you're going to be helped by, in the main, other people having a constructive and a creative attitude and approach. I think there might be one person who's causing problems, but by and large, this weekend, things should be fairly straightforward. Capricorn, you probably feel that you don't want to take anything too seriously, even though you actually have a fair amount of power at your disposal. You have also a certain amount of distance. And just things don't have to be pushed too hard, and maybe there just isn't much of a hurry. And I think that that is a very fortunate approach, and I think that people are going to really appreciate it. They'll know that you've got strength and resilience, and that you really can make things happen if you want to make things happen. But the fact that you're being fairly relaxed about it, that you're not using all the power you have at your disposal, I think will be, greatly appreciated. And I think everyone's going to feel quite confident in your presence. They'll just feel that you're around, and you've got a certain amount of maturity and experience, and they'll feel that just by being with you, everything is going to run smoothly. Now, if there is a problem, if anyone has a problem and anyone needs to take action, or they feel that something has to happen, you can certainly help, because you're going to be very good at suggesting things, even suggesting things that are quite dramatic, but doing it in a sort of non-committal way. You can suggest dramatic solutions in a way that is completely undramatic and is actually quite down to earth. So yeah, overall, Capricorn, I think that you are a good person to have around, and you still have to have some sense of your own boundaries. There may come a point, though, when there's just a little too much pressure. Perhaps other people are making demands on you, not just other people. Maybe that you're supposed to be doing this and you're supposed to be doing that, and you're expected to make appearances here and there. I don't think you want to make too many appearances today. I think that your time is a precious commodity, even if you don't feel that it's a precious commodity. It may be that a couple of non-appearances today may be useful. When I say a non-appearance, I don't mean just not turning up and not telling anyone, but it's about perhaps not accepting short-term invitations. So if someone suggests that you go somewhere today or do something, or this weekend, that you go somewhere this weekend or do something this weekend, your first inclination might be to say yes. It's always good to be seen and heard, but I would be a bit careful in that department. I don't think that you need to give in to outside pressure, and I think you do have to regard your time as being a fairly precious resource, and restrict yourself to things that are important. Now, you are going to be able to cover a lot of ground. because the moon is making a trine to the sun. And I think that you're going to be able to you'll cover this ground in a fairly relaxed kind of way. You're not going to have to push yourself. You're just going to have to sort of consider what tasks you want to do. Yeah, do something because you want to do it, because you'd like to do it. Try not to feel any sense of obligation. If you feel any sense of obligation this weekend, that could really spoil things. You do things because you want to do things. Now you want to do them. Now that might sound a bit lazy and self-indulgent, but you're a Capricorn. Generally, what you want to do is the right thing to do. You want to do things that are useful. So by doing what you want to do, you're actually doing useful stuff, and you're making the world a better place, and you're having a productive weekend. Aquarius. There's a lot going on in air signs at the moment. We've got the moon in Libra, we've got Pluto in Aquarius, we've got Sun, Mercury, Jupiter, and Venus in Gemini. So of the 10 major planets, 6 of them are in air signs. And of course, Aquarius is an air sign. So as a result, Aquarius, this weekend, there's going to be, I think, a good flow. Things are going to be moving, and they're going to be moving quickly, and it's going to be easy, and you can move from one place to another very quickly. And when I say place to another, I don't necessarily mean actually moving from one geographical place to another. It's more about perhaps moving from one concept to another. So if you're involved in one activity this weekend and you want to move to another activity, then you can do it very quickly. Or if you're with people, if you're talking to people, you spend 5 minutes talking to them, you get bored, you can move on to another group of people. So everything flows and everything can change very quickly without any pressure. And that's especially the case on Saturday, when we've got moon trine Jupiter, moon trine Pluto. And I think that your ability to change and transform is just going to be just so easy. This is the way it should be. Pluto is in Aquarius. It might be going retrograde in Aquarius, but that's where it is. It's all about you as the transformer. And you're able to create very fast transformations, almost instantaneous transformations. So I think that makes for, I think, a really quite easy weekend. And at the same time, you can assert your power in a really easy way as well. So if you want to assert yourself, you don't have to make a big fuss about it. You don't have to do anything dramatic. You almost do it through an act of will. You want to create a change. You don't like the way things are. Then you just push it out there. And you're asserting yourself without people even noticing you're asserting yourself, even asserting yourself quite dramatically. And people just don't realize what's going on. So Aquarius, I just want to emphasize that you are in a very strong position, and your ideas can be made real. We all have ideas, ideas all the time, and ideas just come and go, and they can be like it's just almost a waste of time, just as one idea disintegrates and moves into another idea. But with you this weekend, you can have an idea and you can catch that idea. And you can catch this idea and it can be really appealing to you. And then you can turn that idea again into something that is very real and tangible and is a real sign of how wonderfully creative you are. And I think that you're also going to benefit from relationships. I mean, the Sun rules Leo, which is your opposite sign, and on Sunday, Moon is there's a trine between the Moon and the Sun. So Moon in Libra, trine Sun in Gemini, two air signs, and of course the third air sign is Aquarius. So there's a natural facility there, which I think is really going to help you out, and you can just get on with people, and I think that in most cases people are going to like you, but try not to make things too complicated, or try to think that you have to relate things to some big idea. I mean, that can be an Aquarian concept, the big idea. Aquarius is a sign that is often associated with, I suppose, with revolutions. I suppose Uranus was in Aquarius, wasn't it, during the French Revolution and during the latter part of the American Revolution. So, there is this association with ideas and Aquarius, but don't take ideas too seriously. And it is a time when people are rather obsessed about ideas. There are political campaigns, I don't know, all over the place, aren't there? We've got an election coming up in the UK. People are always worrying about the election in the US. We've got elections in France. We've just had European elections. It's a very politicized world in which we're living in, and I think many Aquarians are actually very aware of the politicization that we are in. And so I think that anything to do with philosophy and politics and even religion should probably be avoided. If concepts are too broad, they're going to make things difficult, and you may just actually get involved in a dispute with someone over ideas or politics, which is completely unnecessary, totally unnecessary. So just keep it simple, focus on the facts of the matter rather than the broad ideas, and I'd say also don't try to be too sophisticated. There is a place for just plain enjoyment. And, with 4 planets in Gemini and the Moon in Libra and all this air, it should be a fun weekend. That's the key point, actually. It's got to be fun. If it's not fun, if it's not too serious, if it's too serious, then you're missing the point. You can perhaps be serious at a later stage, but I don't think that people want seriousness. And, Aquarius is a sign which is ruled by Saturn. And so one can take the view that, Saturn is a very serious planet. But even Saturn needs to relax at times. I mean, Saturn, of course, is the ruler of clowns. I'm not saying you be a clown. Of course, clowns have all sorts of other implications in terms of horror films, and people are scared of clowns. But there is a lightness to Saturn which is unusual and is rare, but it's almost like there's a special festival when Saturn has to relax. Is that Saturnalia, for example, in Roman times? I know we're not quite at the solstice yet, and that Saturnalia is associated with the winter solstice, but it's a time for Aquarius as a Saturn-ruled sign, I think, to just relax, have fun, be itself without having to worry about ideas, big ideas. We don't want big ideas, big, heavy, philosophical, religious or political ideas. We don't want that. We just want, a fun, relaxing weekend. Pisces. There are things that Pisces that you are taking seriously. Perhaps you feel that they have been ignored in the past and that now is time to really start to address them. I think to an extent you're right, but not fully. I think there is a danger here, Pisces, that you take things too seriously. And in the process, perhaps you overcomplicate things. You take something which is actually very simple. It's quite obvious. It could be sorted out in 5 seconds, but you decide it's a really big deal and you want to spend all weekend dealing with it. And you get absolutely nowhere. So I would have said, Pisces, that in most cases, the simple solution is actually the best solution. The solution that can be sorted out in 5 seconds is far superior to one that just takes you the whole weekend and even longer. So try to be a bit mellow on this. If you do have a problem, your priority should be a fast solution, because as soon as you've found a solution, then everything is so much easier. In fact, it's so much easier for everyone, and you can start to then, do what you're supposed to be doing. I mean, what are you supposed to be doing? I do think that you can have a fortunate impact on everything around you. You can have a fortunate impact, and you can actually bring people together. And if, in order to bring people together, you need to not take things too seriously, because if you take things too seriously, you're just losing your spontaneity. And bringing people together, at least for a Pisces, at least right now, does require a spontaneous approach. Perhaps making suggestions that just come out of nowhere. And, well, they don't actually come out of nowhere, because you are quite sensitive at the moment. And I think your sensitivity is helped by the fact that we've sort of got this grand trine in air signs. This grand trine, well, technically the grand trine is at the beginning of a weekend, because that's when we've got Moon, trine Pluto, trine Jupiter. But that grand trine, from a Piscean perspective, not from anyone else's perspective, but from your perspective, is actually about emotional flow. And for many people, it's not actually a particularly emotional weekend, because there aren't, well, for one thing, there aren't many planets in water signs. There's Saturn in Pisces, there's Neptune in Pisces, there's nothing else in water signs. But for you, this grand trine in air signs is as emotional as it can get. And I think that you have a good understanding of what makes the world tick and what's actually going on. And it's an understanding that other people don't have. And because you have this understanding, you will know how to treat people. And if you're trying to bring people together, this understanding is really going to help you out. So Pisces, if you're organizing a party or some kind of get-together, on however trivial the level of this get-together, you'll be able to, I think, get it right. And you'll be helped by the fact that the moon is trine Jupiter. Jupiter is your ruler, and the moon is trine Jupiter at the beginning of a weekend. And so that gives you a good understanding, as I said, of what is actually happening. And I think that you'll be able at the same time to make the most of other people. Because this weekend there is a conjunction between Mercury and Venus. Now this Mercury-Venus is actually both geocentric and heliocentric. The heliocentric conjunction is actually much closer, and this Mercury-Venus conjunction allows certain people to really demonstrate their abilities. The cosmos is very creative at the moment. It's encouraging creativity, and some people are really picking up on this creativity and also a certain sense of fun. And these people are like beacons, and you of all people can see who they are, and so you can really make the most of people. You can be like, I don't know, almost like you can choreograph the thing. You can work out who should be where, what people should be doing. Or maybe that's the wrong word, choreograph. You can direct things. You understand where everything should be placed. And I think that your sense of where things should be placed will serve not just you well, but will serve other people very well. So you've got something to do this weekend, and I hope that you're able to make the most of it. People need to be directed, and I think this weekend you're the person to direct them. And that's it with my forecast for the 12 signs. And I am now going to turn to the I Ching. And so I asked the question, what is the weekend going to be like for those watching the I Ching segment of this video? And the first hexagram I got was approach. So the concept of approach, hexagram 19, is actually a situation where things are easy, where we just feel that we're making progress. So this perhaps feeds into the fact that astrologically the weekend starts with the moon in Libra, making a trine to Jupiter, making a trine to Pluto. We all feel that we're moving somewhere, that things are starting to happen. And it starts off very well. But there is a moving line. And the third line from the bottom moves. Now, generally speaking, the third line from the bottom is unfortunate. It needn't be that unfortunate, but it can represent a problem. And the problem here is that, things are going well, things are moving, and then there's a certain danger of complacency. We just think that everything's fine, we're just going to go with the flow. And with this hexagram 19, there is this warning that things are fine, but at a certain stage, things will go wrong. There's always that worry with this hexagram 19 approach. Progress, but up to a point. And we're starting to feel this. We're starting to feel, this is going well, but is it going to carry on going well? And we have to recognize the situation. I think actually we will recognize the situation. And we have to start taking responsibility for what's going on. We can't just go with the flow, because if we go with the flow, then in the end, this flow will, it will run us over a cliff, or it'll be like the Niagara Falls. So we can't go with the flow. We have to be concerned. We have to recognize that this is not going to carry on forever. And I think that is something that we will do. And so what we have to do is start to be a little more responsible. We have to say, hold on, what do we need to do to make sure that things don't go wrong? And the James Legge translation of the I Ching talks about anxious reflection. And I think that really sums it up, what we should be doing. We are starting to reflect on the situation this weekend. Things are going okay, but we're getting anxious. But anxious in a really constructive way. We realize, something's not right, and we need to sort it out. Now, the implication with this hexagram is we've got a single moving line. The implication is actually that we will sort it out. So work out what can go wrong, take action, be in control, be responsible, and then that allows us to consider the hexagram that follows. So third line from the bottom moves, and that takes us to hexagram 11, which is peace. This is the way it can go. So by taking responsibility, through this anxious reflection, we'll be able to understand what's going to go wrong or what could go wrong, fix the problem, and this brings us to this hexagram, which is really one of the best hexagrams in the book. Peace. Everything is as it should be. It's not a top-heavy hexagram. We've got a very balanced hexagram. The bottom three lines are all unbroken. The top three lines are all broken. It's not top-heavy. It's not going to get upset. And I think the Wilhelm I Ching says something like the small departs and the great is arriving. So, in a sense, the conditions have been met for real progress. So the previous hexagram 19 was about progress, but progress which in the end would run into trouble. But by this stage, because we've dealt with the problem, because we've had that anxious reflection, we can now move into 11, which is peace, where we can really end the weekend feeling pretty good. And that's a reminder that on Sunday, the moon is trine the sun. Moon in Libra is trine the sun in Gemini. That is harmonious. Back to the concept, Charles Harvey's idea, I think, of the cosmic marriage. And everything is in order. And so I think that the weekend ends, I think, on a very satisfactory note. Now I want to consider the solstice, I think. I think I'll start with the solstice and I'll talk about solar returns later. I didn't really want to spend very long on the solstice. I don't actually find it it's not a particularly interesting solstice, but I'm nonetheless feel I need to just do a preview of the solstice and the main things going on here. So what we can do is we can simply set up a chart for the solstice. This is the precise time that the sun moves into Cancer. This is where the sun has peak declination. So if I look at the ephemeris here, and I can see that the sun's declination starts June at 22 degrees 9 north, and it peaks at 23:36 north, that's the absolute peak, and so that is peak declination. That is the longest day in the northern hemisphere, shortest day in the southern hemisphere, and that precise moment is at 9:51 p.m. on which is what day of the week is that? That's the 20th. Just to be clear on that is which is a Thursday. So on Thursday at 9:51 p.m. that's when it peaks. Now that's London time. So 9:51 p.m. will be earlier in the day if you're in the Americas. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, of course, the solstice won't happen until the following day. So it's Thursday or Friday, depending on your time zone. So the theory with the solstice would be that at that precise moment, the positions of the planets get locked. So the solstice is like a gateway. The gates open at that precise time, 9:51 p.m., and the whole force of the cosmos comes in to our material sphere. And those planets have a lasting influence. Probably lasting, I would have said, about 3 months until the autumnal equinox at the end of September. So this sort of sets up the summer. Now, as you know, I've regarded us as being going into the summer of discontent. Now, talking about the summer of discontent, I did not base this on the solstice. I think that this chart for the solstice is, in itself, is not a particularly big deal. Here's the chart set for London. Yes, there's a Mercury-Venus conjunction at the time of the solstice, but it's that's nice. I suppose it's quite creative, a Mercury-Venus conjunction. It's very artistic, so I think for many of us we can have a very productive summer where we can create wonderful things. So if you've got any artistic abilities, writing, painting, singing, music, whatever it is, perhaps that's what you should focus the summer on. And it's Mercury Venus in Cancer. That's a nice emotional sign. I do associate the sign Cancer with writing, rather than Gemini. I think Geminis are actually better writers than Geminis, by the way. And I'm saying it as a Gemini. I'm not a great writer. I tried writing fiction once. I'm absolutely terrible at it. I'm just so factual that it's unreadable. So I can't do fiction. Absolutely not. It's one of my big regrets. I really would have loved to have been able to write novels, but I can't do it. If I was a Cancer, I think it might have been a different story. So that is very creative. And if you want to write, if you're a Cancerian particularly, you want to write a novel, Mercury-Venus conjunction in Cancer, that should work out very well. Midpoints, I can look at the midpoints that the sun is on. But that doesn't really help. I looked at the midpoints that the sun is on. The sun is on the solstice, so that might give us some idea. I'm always looking for something dramatic, but okay. The sun is, by definition, almost on the Neptune Aries midpoint. It's got some midpoints involving hypothetical planets. But I suppose I should mention that. I should mention the Neptune. Neptune is at 2954 Pisces. So Neptune is really close to the Aries point. Neptune is about to go retrograde, because I think Neptune goes retrograde, I think it's at 2955. So with Neptune going retrograde at the Aries point, I think that this 2956, I think it goes retrograde, 1st or 2nd of July at 2956. So with Neptune on the verge of going retrograde, square the sun. So that is a reminder that this solstice is bringing in the chaos of Neptune. Neptune is just nebulous on the Aries point. Now, it may be with Neptune on the Aries point that over the summer some wonderful drugs are going to be discovered, or maybe not so wonderful drugs. Maybe there's some drug company that's working on some psychoactive drug or some antidepressant. So there may be a pharmaceutical discovery, perhaps, or some event relating to drugs with Neptune very close to the Aries point. And the solstice picks up on it because that is when you have Sun square Neptune. So from a positive side, that sort of emphasizes the imagination of the solstice. But it is going to be an imaginative time with Mercury and Venus, the Mercury-Venus conjunction and Sun square Neptune. But overall, I don't find this to be a particularly impressive chart for the solstice. Still, I would like to know where on earth this is likely to have maximum impact. There are certain places we would expect there to be a big impact. We would expect there to be a big impact in places which have an election over the next few months, like UK has got an election on the 4th. We've got, at the same time, we've got France, we've got an election. There's always stuff going on in the US, even though there's not an election. I suppose there'll be primary elections. I don't know. There's some first round elections in the US. It sort of varies from locality to locality. But let's put that on a map, and let's map the solstice to see where we might expect a bit of drama. So there's the world at the time of the solstice. I'm finding Europe rather interesting. There is stuff going on in Europe. There's actually, you probably can't see it on the screen, there may be some stuff going on in Korea, but so I'm going to focus on Europe and Korea. Let's look at Europe first. So let's put up a map of Europe for the solstice. So at the time of the solstice in Europe, you see that red line? That's all the places where Mars is on the IC. So that sort of misses London. You'd expect London has got this big election coming up, but do we know maybe we know the results anyway. Well, we do know what the results anyway. Maybe that's not where the drama's going to be from the solstice perspective. This red line actually goes through Dublin. And I would have said that, and Belfast, so that Mars on the IC may point to trouble in the Emerald Isle, with Belfast and Dublin being picked up by Mars on the IC. I mean, I know that in Dublin, there are, in Ireland in general, there are all sorts of problems. I mean, I suppose you've got the economy, you've got immigration, I mean, you've got, reverberations from the European elections. So you've got major dissatisfaction in Ireland, as I understand it. Of course, there's major dissatisfaction everywhere. I mean, no country is immune from dissatisfaction. But I think the solstice could hit Ireland quite hard. Then we've got Uranus is on the IC, so that's this red line is all the places where Uranus is on the IC, and so you can see that that goes through Oslo, through Germany, pretty close to Munich, Italy. So yeah, there's potential instability running through Germany and Italy. We can actually construct a theoretical place where Pluto's rising and Uranus is on a descendant, which would be somewhere halfway between Milan and Rome. So Italy might be hit by the solstice. I think Germany could be hit by the solstice. Now, in terms of France, we know there's an election. And Mars is not on the IC in France. Uranus is not exactly on the IC in France either. But the Mars-Uranus midpoint, well, you can't really see it on this map, but there is a Mars-Uranus midpoint. The Mars-Uranus midpoint actually pretty much goes through Paris. So it may be that Paris actually picks up the full force of that Mars-Uranus, even though it doesn't seem to be the case on this map. So places that I would consider in Europe that could be hit by the solstice, I would have said Dublin. Dublin is hit doubly because you can see we've got a crossover here. So for Dublin, we've got Mars on the IC, and we've got the Sun on a descendant. You see Dublin is picked up exactly there. So look out for Ireland. Paris, not shown on this map, but it is on the Mars-Uranus midpoint. The midheaven is, or the IC is on the Mars-Uranus midpoint in Paris, so that's something to look at. Also, Oslo, Copenhagen. I'd probably focus most on Italy. Although everyone's been very complimentary about Giorgia Meloni. Her party did quite well in the European elections, relatively speaking. She seems to be one leader who seems to be handling the situation. I did look at her chart, Giorgia Meloni. She has a really strong chart. Giorgia Meloni is not someone to be underestimated. But still, the solstice could cause a few issues. Then I quickly wanted to look at the Korean Peninsula. Again, I mean, what's going to happen in Korea? I don't know. Can anything happen in Korea? I don't know whether it will show me the whole Korean Peninsula. Probably not. It will probably show me... Well, here's North Korea. We'll have to use our imagination. So okay, here's North Korea. But by extension, it's sort of South Korea as well. So you can see that at the time of the solstice, Saturn is on the midheaven through the Korean Peninsula, and I'm not saying much is going to happen, but maybe that's part of a world we need to consider. Maybe there are issues for North Korea and South Korea as well. North Korea, relations between North and South Korea. I mean, that is a possibility. So that's the solstice, and I now want to finish by just going back to a few solar returns. People did make some comments about solar returns. One comment was that I had not looked at RFK's solar return. And as I said at the beginning of this video, I don't think there's any point in looking at JFK's solar lunar return because we don't know for sure when he's born. But still, if you're interested, here is RFK's solar return. This is set for January the 17th, 2024. And I'll compare his natal chart with his solar return. So obviously he's got his sun, and the sun is exactly where it was when he was born. I've set this up for midday. So in his solar return, I don't see a great deal going on here. We know he's got his Pluto is transiting his Mercury at the time of his solar return. I'm not very impressed with this solar return, particularly as I don't have a time of birth. So if I don't have a time of birth, I can't even look at angularity. So angularity is when you've got a planet which is, for example, conjunct the South Node or conjunct the midheaven. We don't have any ascendant or the midheaven for RFK. So it's very difficult to say anything particularly useful about the solar return. So he's got Venus square Neptune at his solar return. Is that great to have a solar return with Venus square Neptune? I suppose we can also look at any aspects involving the Sun. Always look at solar aspects there. Yes, he's got Sun conjunct Pluto, but that is not a big deal about in the solar return. But that's just reminding us that he has recently had Pluto transiting his Sun, so he's going to have Pluto conjunct Sun by definition in his solar return. So I don't think that tells us anything special about his solar return. Just Venus square Neptune. Venus square Neptune doesn't strike me as having, particularly particularly good judgment. I think his vice presidential pick was not particularly good, not particularly effective. I don't think his campaign is getting the emphasis it used to get to. But as I said with RFK, in the end, when people tally the votes, people will just decide, did he help Trump or did he help Biden? And that's what he's all about. So, and also because we don't have a really completely accurately timed birth. It's not an A or B Rodden rating. I don't think we have a timed birth, and you should never vote for someone if you don't have a confirmed timed birth. You just don't know what you're voting for, and I don't care if there's a supposed time of birth for RFK. Rodden gives it a C rating, which is simply not good enough. Okay, so that's RFK's solar return. So as you probably got the impression I'm not really interested in RFK's solar return. Just a couple of solar returns of historic figures, just to sort of warm things up. I thought, as I looked at solar returns so much yesterday, I just wanted to look at Adolf Hitler's solar return for 1932. So here's Adolf Hitler's horoscope, and Adolf Hitler, he became Chancellor of Germany on January the 30th, 1933. So if we want to know what kind of year he was having 1932 and early 1933, we would look at his solar return. And here's his solar return for 1932. And there are a couple of interesting points about this solar return. Firstly, Mars rising. So always look at the ascendant and what the degree of the ascendant is there a rising planet? And if there is a rising planet, that can be a good sign of success. And you can, there we have Mars pretty close to the ascendant, at least in the same sign as the ascendant, and we've got that Mercury-Mars conjunction there. But there's another thing about this solar return which is interesting, and the fact is there is an exact moon square Saturn. When I say exact, I mean exact. Remember, FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, he had, in his solar return before winning the 1932 presidential election, he had an exact Sun-Mars conjunction. I mean exact. So if you've got an exact aspect, that can have really special implications. Now, so moon square Saturn is a bad aspect by any estimate. And the moon is in Scorpio, and it's at close to 3 degrees Scorpio. So this is a terrible, terrible moon. Yet he still got elected. And this indicates that perhaps for politicians, if you have a terrible chart and you're in your solar return, maybe you can still get elected because it's just showing it's terrible for the world. So your chart has become collectivized. And so that moon square Saturn, that has become collective. Of course, people on the right, the sort of Austrian school of economics, would probably say the same thing about Franklin Delano Roosevelt. So here's Franklin Delano Roosevelt just before he became elected, exact Sun conjunct Mars. Now, I would have said that was fortunate because the Sun was ruling his midheaven and the Mars was ruling his ascendant. But you could say, if you're on, it depends on your political opinion. I know a lot of people think that FDR is a great president, but there are people in the Austrian school who would say that he interfered in the American economy, he attacked people's freedoms, and here he is, there's his Sun-Mars conjunction. That just shows Sun conjunct Mars. Sun is a natural ruler of gold, isn't it? Conjunct Mars, he's the man that confiscated everyone's gold in America. So a lot of people in America haven't forgiven him for that. Another dictator who is Benito Mussolini, July the 29th, 1883. born in Dovadola, Italy. And so he came to power, he was at the end of October 1922. That's when he became Il Duce. And here is Benito Mussolini's solar return for July the 30th, 1922, before he became dictator. Again, we've got this exact bad aspect here. Okay, we've got Sun on the IC, so it's perhaps a strong Sun because it's on the IC, but Mars square Uranus. So Mars square Uranus may not be just about him. It's, he is a powerful politician. It's showing what impact this had on the world, and particularly on Italy. So with people like Hitler, Mussolini, or senior politicians, you have to kind of regard that chart as being not just about the success or failure of the year, but what impact it has on the country they are governing. And yes, there's Mars square Uranus. Now, his solar return for 1944 is also interesting. So if we look at if we go to there's Benito Mussolini's chart, and if we have his solar return for 1944, we see Uranus on the midheaven, and Mars is square Uranus. And so this was a year in which he was killed, in which he was executed by partisans, I think, in Italy. And so he had Mars-Uranus square in a solar return before he came to power in 1922. And he had Mars-Uranus square in a solar return before he was executed. Or I don't know, is execute the right word, or was he lynched? I don't know. Hung upside down with his girlfriend. It wasn't particularly pleasant. I suppose you could see Uranus on the midheaven up there. So that's just interesting how we've got that repeated theme with Mars and Uranus. Now, I want to consider Joe Biden again, because we do have this problem with Joe Biden that his solar return, because he's born on November the 20th, it's so close to the presidential election. So which one does one choose? Can one actually backdate a solar return? Can one actually look at his solar return on November the 20th, say 2024, and look at that and say, that means he's going to win or lose the presidential election of something which happened 2 weeks before. So I just wanted to have a look at a couple of Joe Biden's solar returns. Joe Biden, as far as I know, Joe Biden's political career started in 1972 when I think he got elected to the Senate. Is that right? I don't think it was the House of Representatives. When he got elected to the Senate. And so this is Joe Biden's solar return set for November the 20th, 1971. So there were Senate elections in November 1972. Of course, this is when Nixon won his second term, 1972 as well. So nearly a year after his 71 birthday, his solar return, but not quite. That's when there were Senate elections. And it's a wonderful chart. He's got Sagittarius rising, Jupiter rising, Pluto on the midheaven, I think in the context of this, about power, political power. So this is a solar return which really kicked off Joe Biden's political career, at least in front rank politics. And so Pluto on the midheaven, Jupiter rising. That Jupiter rising in Sagittarius is I think really fortunate. And plus you've got a fairly exact Mercury-Venus conjunction in Sagittarius. So we don't need to look at the November the 20th, 1972 chart to see his success in being elected to the Senate. It's all there in his November the 20th, 1971 chart. Biden's chart set for 72 is, well, there it is. To my mind, it's a bit of a nothing, unless you could look at the ascendant here. Now, Biden's time of birth, I think, is given at 8:30. That's a bit vague. It could be 1 minute, a few minutes before or after. The fixed star Skeet is relatively close to the ascendant in that November the 19th, 1972 chart. It's over a degree away, but Skeet can be about disasters, shipwrecks, terrible things happening. And so in this case, I think we can say that Skeet was having an impact on his year ahead. And of course, the following month was when you had the accident in which his wife and daughter were killed and his 2 sons were seriously injured. So that might be how the Skeet is working. Finally, I want to go back to Donald Trump's chart, and it was pointed out to me that there was one thing I'd missed out, and I just wanted to correct that omission. So here is Donald Trump's solar return for this year. Now, my view on that solar return, look, there could be problems. He's got Moon opposition Saturn. Can we say that Trump is not going to be elected because he's got Moon opposition Saturn here? No. I mean, Hitler got elected, or eventually chosen, with his previous solar return had Moon square Saturn exact no orb, which is pretty disastrous. On the other hand, at first sight, there's nothing on the ascendant, is there? He's got no planet's angle, no wonderful planet on the angle. But as was pointed out to me, thank you very much for the commenter for reminding me of this. I should have noticed it. But it's his ascendant is very close to the sun of the United States. So here is, so that's the, so the USA's chart. So the USA has its sun at 1319 Cancer. And so going back to Donald Trump's chart, or Donald Trump's solar return, his sun is at 1450. His ascendant was at 1415 Cancer. Now, his ascendant, maybe even, we have a precise time for him, so it's likely that that is his ascendant. But the ascendant of his solar return is within a degree of America's sun. And you could argue that that gives him an affinity with America, potentially, with this solar return, and that may help him get elected. Now, going back to the America chart, what is the link between Trump's chart? There's America's chart in the middle, and there is Trump's chart on the outer wheel. In fact, this is Trump's solar return is on the outer wheel. So there's Trump's sun, by the way. It's just a reminder that Trump's sun is conjunct America's Mars and square America's Neptune. So Trump has his America has a Mars-Neptune square, and Trump is really configuring it. He's really hitting it. Now, critics of Trump will say, well, yeah, that just shows what he tried to do with the Capitol. That's one view. But maybe he's short-circuiting America. Mars square Neptune. America doesn't really know how to assert itself. It does do it. It has all these foreign adventures. Mars square Neptune puts its energy into things, this and that, and whatever, Mars square Neptune. But Trump picks up on it all. Maybe he's feeding off it. And at the time of his solar return, there is a Sun conjunct Mercury. So Trump's solar return, Trump's solar return has Sun conjunct Mercury. So Mercury is conjunct is conjunct Trump's Sun at the time of his solar return. Is that good or is it bad? Critics of Trump will say Mercury's combust. So Trump can't make good decisions with his solar return. Fans of Trump might say, well, that's a good thing because Mercury is conjunct his Sun. This is the man who can be the orator. Mercury is picking up on his Sun. So anyway, that is Trump's solar return. Just a reminder that in his solar return, it does pick up on America's Sun. So that's all I'm going to say about solar returns. And I hope you all have a great weekend. So thank you very much for listening to me. I hope you found this video of some interest. If you enjoyed this video, I would be grateful if you were to like it. If you enjoyed the video and you're not subscribed, I would of course be grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So thanks again for listening, and I will talk to you again very soon.